Hello everyone. My name is Shreya Jain and we are covering data privacy related topics across the globe. This is the second part of Article 2 where we are covering Clause 2, Clause 3 and Clause 4. We have already covered Clause 1 in the first part in our previous video. A link to the same is shared in the description. Let me provide a glimpse of what Clause 1 is all about. Before we move ahead, Clause 1 incorporates processing of personal data by automated means, by other than automated means, and through filing system. And we also have provided detailed understanding of all the three terminologies by using relevant examples. Moving forward, this is a mind map to get a quick glimpse of Article 2. If you need the map, please reach out to us. Now, let's see our today's agenda. As we have mentioned earlier, we are covering Clause 2, Clause 3, and Clause 4 of Article 2 of GDPR. Starting with Clause 2. Clause 2 incorporates a very important part of the regulation. It says that GDPR is not applicable to all the processing activities of personal data. There are a few exceptions where GDPR is not applicable. So, what are those exceptions? Well, there are four exceptions mentioned in the regulation. Exception 1 is any activity which falls outside the scope of European Union is not covered by GDPR. For example, activities concerning national security such as processing by intelligence services. Therefore, it can be said that it is the sole responsibility of member states to keep a check on national security. For example, an international agreement covering defense or military matters would not be covered since these areas generally do not fall within the EU law. This exception is incomplete without discussing Tele2 case. Tele2 is a leading European telecommunication operator and has a high level of media exposure. One of the legislations in Sweden and the UK imposed an obligation on companies like Tele2 to retain traffic and location data. So, the question arises is whether the legislation at the issue falls within the scope of EU law. In this particular case, the CJEU held that traffic and location data provides very personal information about the private lives of any person and establish a profile of the person concerned. Now, let's come to exception 2. Exception 2 entails processing done by the member states when carrying out activities which fall within the scope of the Treaty of European Union. When we talk about this exception, we must talk about the interest of each member states when it comes to common foreign and security policies. This exception is protecting the individuals with regard to the processing of their personal data by the member states. Therefore, it is under the control of independent authorities of the member states to check whether they are needed to comply with regulation or not. Now, let's quickly move to exception number 3. It says GDPR shall not be applied to the processing of personal data in the course of a purely personal or household activity. Therefore, private or family life of individuals are not included under the scope of GDPR. In case private data such as pictures are shared on the internet, then it will not be considered as private life. And in this situation, GDPR shall be applied. For example, somebody is monitoring and recording his own garden. The property is fenced, and only the controller himself and his family are entering the garden on a regular basis. This would fall under the household exemption, provided that the extent of camera should not extend even partially to a public space or neighboring property. Let's understand this through a leading case law, Bodil Lindquist case. Mrs. Lindquist is a Swedish woman. She has set up her own homepage on the internet and posted text concerning her volunteers on the website. Text included phone numbers, names, and in some cases, co workers, health related information, and other identifiable information. She did not obtain consent from her co workers before sharing their details online. However, she removed the web pages as soon as she received a request from her colleague. The court ruled that Mrs. Lindquist was in breach of the Data Protection Directive because posting information related to person on a website constitutes processing of personal data. And what she did was not purely personal or household activities. Now, this may interest you a little. Social networking websites falls within the scope of exemption and hence it does not constitute processing of personal data. For example, if a family picture is posted on a social networking website, this would not be covered under GDPR. However, if the same platform is used for commercial purposes, then there's a second opinion about the same. For example, if a picture of any commercial event is posted on any website, then it may constitute as processing of personal data and is governed by GDPR. Now, moving further with the last exception. Alongside GDPR, a directive was incorporated which established rules with regard to the processing of personal data by competent authorities. These authorities process personal data for purposes of enforcement of law, such as prevention of criminal offenses, execution of criminal penalties, safeguarding against the threats, prevention of threats to public security, and free movement of data. In these prescribed purposes, GDPR has no role to be taken care of. These are the tasks that are governed by the Law Enforcement Data Protection Directive. However, if the similar tasks are carried out for the purposes other than mentioned before, then both Union law and GDPR is applied. So finally, we have completed all the pointers where GDPR is not applicable. Now moving further, let's see what clause 3 entails. Clause 3 mentions about a regulation wherein processing of personal data is done by union institutions and bodies, offices and agencies. The said regulation has now been replaced with a new one. Now, the new one covers 2 points. One is rules for protection of personal data in the EU institutions, and second, duties of EDPS, which is also known as European Data Protection Supervisor. Let me explain what EDPS is all about. EDPS is a supervisory authority which supervises processing activities of EU institutions and bodies. And it also works as advisory body on policies and legislations. Now the last clause. Let's see what clause 4 speaks about. Clause 4 speaks about e-privacy and e-commerce directives. It states that this regulation shall not have any prejudice to the application of e-commerce directive. E-commerce directive majorly focuses on the liability rules of intermediary service providers. They are also called as ISPs. It also contributes to the proper functioning of the internal market. You must be wondering what ISPs are all about. Well, ISPs are the services such as sale of goods online or say services which are transmitted point to point like video on demand, commercial communications by email, etc. To know more about ISPs, kindly check the link in the comment box below. Coming again to topic e-commerce directive and GDPR has well defined roles when it comes to ISPs. E-commerce directive determines liability of ISPs for actions of users, whereas GDPR deals with other obligations such as rectification or erasure of data. So, this was Article 2 of GDPR. We have tried to cover a lot of points in the video. We might miss out a few points, and therefore, for your reference, we are providing a few links which you might want to go through to have a deeper understanding of the article. In our next video, we are covering Article 3, that is territorial scope of GDPR. To watch more such videos and if you need a simplified version of GDPR and data privacy regulation, kindly reach out to us. We will be more than happy to simplify it for you. And if you have any queries or concerns, or if you want to learn any related topic, kindly comment on the comment box below. We will be happy to cover that for you. If you like this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow our LinkedIn page, Ministry of Security. Thank you. And a very special thanks to Suki for all the guidance throughout this journey.